Every year, companies invest millions of dollars into research and development for new and upcoming chemistries for agriculture. Today, joining us on FieldLink is Dr. Aaron Hert. Dr. Hert will share some critical insight on how Helena approaches the research and development of new and unique products. Then, Jody Lawrence will join us from Nashville to provide us a commodity update. And finally, Resurge is the featured product for this month. Ben Wiggins, a research and development specialist at Helena, will share his story on how this unique product was developed and brought to the marketplace for agriculture and the specialty market. Stay tuned for FieldLink. Joining us today here on FieldLink is Aaron Hert. Dr. Aaron Hert is the head of research and development here at the Helena Products Group. And Aaron, welcome to FieldLink.
Thank you very much.
Aaron, tell us a little bit, before we dive in, about your department, some of the things you do in research and development for the Helena Products Group. Tell us a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Illinois.
Okay.
Corn and beans.
Corn and bean country. Did you grow up on a farm then?
I did not.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
So I went to the University of Florida for my master's and my PhD in plant pathology.
Okay. So grew up in Illinois and went to the University of Florida and studied there in plant pathology, right?
Plant pathology.
Okay.
Yes,
and after that, did you work in industry for a while?
So right out of grad school, I actually got lucky enough to jump into industry, working with Syngenta for 5 seasons before I joined Helena.
Okay, awesome. And where did you do that geographically?
So I was in Florida, down in Vero Beach. They have a research station there that I worked out. I was one of the plant pathologists there on station.
Okay, and what was your first role with Helena then, as you made that transition?
So I jumped from Florida all the way out to California. So
Wow.
Decided to expand my horizons a bit and play around with some new variety of crops.
Okay, so Aaron, tell us a little bit about some of the crops and some of the geographies that you worked in California.
So we covered. So my role when I moved to California was a research and development contract researcher.
Okay.
So what that means is we're working with all of industry to perform trial work for them for developing their technologies. So we worked in the Central Valley, the Central Coast, and we worked with everything from almonds to alfalfa.
Wow.
Pretty much the spectrum. Obviously, grapes is in there. There's plenty of tomatoes in that area, lettuce. So we did the variety.
A wide range of crops, certainly. Absolutely. In California, sure, the number gets thrown around 200-300 crops. It's just a lot of different things.
Yes,
so
sir.
You certainly got an opportunity to work in that market, along with your Florida market. And, of course, growing up in Illinois, having a lot of experience in corn and beans. So you're definitely qualified to cover a lot of different crops, or at least be able to have the conversation.
Sure can, yeah.
Aaron, tell us a little bit about your role here at the Helena Products Group, what you do in R&D. What's your group's mission?
So research and development is really about developing the technologies that come to us to validate those technologies. So it's all about demonstrating the value that these technologies potentially can bring to the market. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to demonstrate that value. So the better we understand them, the better we can evaluate and demonstrate that. So our customer, which can be both internal focused and external focus, can be satisfied that we've really determined that there is a value there that's worth investing in.
Yeah, just at the end of the day, you're validating. Does this product really bring value to the grower or to the turf customer, to the ornamental customer at the end of the day?
Exactly.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the wide range of research products. How many products do you typically look at in a season?
So we're right now probably 50 plus technologies that we're looking at across all categories. That's everything from crop protection, whether it's fungicides, insecticides, seed treatments, herbicides, adjuvants. Then you cross over into your crop production products, your nutrients, your Coron technology that we have. There are starter fertilizers. So we cover the gamut, and it's pretty widespread across all those departments.
And Aaron, is it in a wide range of crops and cropping systems that you're evaluating these products with? Yeah,
so last year we had over 48 different cropping systems that we evaluated those technology across.
And what's the range of those kind of crops? I mean,
it's all across the U.S. It really depends year to year where that goes, based on where those projects are going to be focused. So if it's a California market, you can imagine the crop variety in California we may have to focus on. But generally, it's the main 5-6 crops: corn, cotton, beans, rice, sugarcane, those kind of crops.
Okay.
But certainly into the specialty market, we can get into tomatoes and melons and
Strawberries and blueberries.
And especially as we are looking more and more into the organic product market, we're definitely touching more of those specialty crops on the coast.
Wow. I know organic is the hot word, obviously, in some markets, and it's really continuing to grow. What kind of organic activity are you guys seeing from a research standpoint? Is there more interest in that area?
Absolutely. Definitely in crop production, we've had products in the market for quite a while that fit that category, but on crop protection, that's more challenging to get a product that's consistent. So that's our challenge today, is to really look at products that are consistently performing so that we can bring it to the customer and know that there's value there that they can count on.
For sure. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about your team here in Memphis, your research and development team. How many staff members do you have, and how are they broken up?
So right now we have 3 technical development managers, and they're responsible for working with brand to develop the protocols, to put out the field test into our field. For us, that means that we're working with third-party professional contract researchers. Okay. So we're looking at non-biased evaluation of our technologies to give us real-world conditions in those field trials. So they work closely with those folks through the season. We visit trials during the season. But they're also in turn coming back and summarizing that information and then presenting that back to brand to hopefully make some good technical decisions on where we're at with these development products. The 3 technical development managers that we have on our team, we have 2 in crop protection and 1 in crop production currently. So Ben Wiggins is our crop production currently.
Okay.
And we have another person going to join us soon to fill that open role. We have 2 in crop protection. We have Bradley Greer and we have Clay Perkins.
Oh, right.
And so those 2 are PhDs. Ben got his master's degree. So we're using and hedging our bets on their expertise for testing.
For testing, and they're working with, as you mentioned, those third-party researchers across the nation. And how many researchers, ballpark, are you working with on a typical annual basis?
So we're close to 100 every year.
Wow.
Last year we were 111. This year right now, with just our testing, we're at 70.
Okay.
But our total testing really includes our technical service managers in the field who are also doing some development work and more product support. So you combine those together and we're over 100.
And that's obviously third-party research would be a lot of independents, but you have some university research in there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did 22 states worth of university testing last year. So we have, and that's some cases that's multiple universities. Typically that's an individual university each state.
Aaron, broadly speaking, what's the power of using third-party research for a lot of these trials that you're describing? What's the value of that?
So they're really a critical part of the process, and it's important because we need professionals who are replicating what a grower would see in the field. They're working in real-world conditions in the field. They're experts in their field for evaluating those technologies. So they're pathologists, they're weed scientists, they're entomologists, they're agronomists by training. So they know how to evaluate these crops to make sure we're getting good data from our work.
Wow. And how many, treatments do you typically do in a year? You mentioned, I think you said 100 researchers roughly last year, or 111, I think was the number. How many entries or how many trials were you actually doing?
We were just under 600 last year.
Wow.
And we're tracking similar this year, and probably a little over that.
My goodness, that's a lot of content that you're certainly working there. Aaron, walk us through a typical year or a typical season as a research and developer for the Helena Products Group. Walk us through that journey.
All right, I'll start off obviously in January here. So for us, as we're beginning the year, we're really focused on looking at the data from the prior year, summarizing that and understanding where are we in the development process for each project that we have in our portfolio. So at that point, we'll meet with brand and develop protocols. We'll get those approved. We'll get those distributed to our researchers across the U.S. And that's important that we do that early in the season, up until about March.
Right.
And really the cutoff is the end of April.
Okay.
As we're starting to plant, that really gets filled. So our focus really early is to communicate that well with the researchers, set ourselves up for a good season where we got space in the fields for those primary researchers, because they are popular and they do good work. As we go into the season, we switch modes into field days. We have one here at the Agri Center.
Sure.
So we'll be focused on setting that up, preparing that to bring in our internal folks and some external customers to view some of the technology that we're bringing to the market. So that's another exciting time, very busy time, as well at that same moment, we're really starting to look at when is the proper time to go view some of these trials across the U.S.
Right.
So we'll get together as a group and determine who's going to which business unit. We can start setting priorities for which trials to view. So through the summertime, that's a big focus, is field day and trial visits.
That's where your team's actually boots on the ground, meeting with these 100 plus researchers across the nation, walking trials. Just, a product may perform one way in Georgia, but maybe differently in Idaho, for example.
Yeah. And as much as we love the researchers we work with, sometimes eyes on is so much better than just seeing a report at the end of the year.
Right.
So it's important that we know where those high value trials are so that we can get our eyes on, get brand out there with us. Let's look at it together. Let's make sure we're seeing what we think we do out of the field. As we get towards this time of year, data's starting to flow in. So
Okay.
now we're collecting that data from that season. We're summarizing. We're putting those together to present the brand, so that we can make an informed decision about where we are with those projects, whether 2 years is enough or we need to go 3, 4, depending on that project specifically. So the year stays pretty busy. We don't have a lot of downtime, but that is what ag is. So.
Right. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that, out of these 100 trials, 600 different, experiments that are taking place out there, applications or so, all of that data is coming back for you and your team and your colleagues to really filter, and evaluate and say, did it do what we expected it to do?
Exactly.
And walk us through that process. How do you download that information to the team?
So I think the first step is really to look at the data and quality itself, to make sure that we're not looking at muddied data, that we've got some error in there. So the first thing is to really speak with the researcher, make sure that they didn't have any issues that maybe wasn't captured in the
environmental issues, that sort of thing.
We've seen a lot of irregular weather over the last several years that could all impact these things. So we just need to be really aware of those challenges they may have faced as we're starting to evaluate that data. Then as we start to look at trends across all our locations for an individual project, we may test them between 4 and 6, even up to 12 locations, so we can look at consistency across those geographies. Once we can see those trends, then we'll meet with the brand team to really relay what we're seeing. If there's any watch-outs we need to be aware of, we need to maybe focus in on going forward to make sure we don't have any surprises once we get commercial with any of these technologies.
Definitely a lot of minds, working on these projects. It's not a one and done, is it?
Absolutely not.
Roughly how long, I guess, does it take to do research, as you see it, to bring a product to the marketplace at Helena?
Typically, it's 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
We have some that extended beyond that, but we really need to trust yet verify. So we're not really taking the early stage of development and discovering new active ingredients, but we're incorporating technologies from many different places to create a unique opportunity in the market. Usually we're adding value from a lot of different places, and certainly our lab has a top-notch staff that can help us to identify what things can add some additional value.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point. You've got the brand team and, of course, the laboratory team that's really collaborating with you to, let's get it in the right ballpark to begin with before we go to the field and do these research trials. And then let's really evaluate that over the next couple of years in many cases.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, where do you foresee the future going with research and development? What are some new trends that you're picking up in the marketplace?
Well, I certainly think that organic side of things is definitely a hot topic right now, and just being able to fill the needs of the market. So that's definitely a focus on crop protection. And right now I would say that's probably more focused on the fungicide side. It's difficult to create an organic herbicide, and insecticides are similarly challenging. So that's probably on the crop protection side where we see a lot of movement. Crop production, I think we're just continuing to expand on filling in the gaps that we have in our portfolio.
Sure.
And looking for those opportunities and products that can leave us in a unique proposition so that we can find a good solution at all levels, not just at the high end, but for each grower's needs. We're very prescriptive in the way we work, and so we need to provide solutions that can fit those prescriptions as they find a need.
Right, and definitely, just a lot of uniqueness out there. It's an evolving area, isn't it? I mean, who would have ever thought biologicals, the level that we're hearing that term, and even in our own portfolio, is expanding and exploding in lots of different areas.
they're gaining legitimacy too. I think there's a lot of snake oils out there in the past, one and done 1 year and they're disappearing. That can be a real detriment to the opportunity for these biologicals in the marketplace. And I think we're finding more legitimate products out there today that can fit across multiple geographies, and it's identifying those and looking for opportunities to utilize those in the market.
Well, we've definitely been a leader in that area for the years, and I know your team's been very involved and instrumental in bringing a lot of those unique products to the marketplace. Dr. Hert, I want to thank you for joining us today here on FieldLink as we learn a little bit more about the research and development area here at the Helena Products Group.
Thank you.
Joining us from Nashville is Jody Lawrence to visit with us a little bit about the commodity markets. Kind of a weird time, Jody, as harvest wraps up across most of the nation. We're still hearing the rumbling around things like in Russia. We're going to learn a little bit from you there, and also the elections taking place here recently. And of course, there's still chattering about China. Are they going to continue their zero tolerance policy towards COVID or not? And joining us from Nashville is Jody. Jody, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be back. Yeah, there have been a lot of events, but the markets really have not gone too far one way or the other. Wheat has fallen on the market, more embracing that Russia is going to renew the deal, but the deadline is still Saturday, November 19th, and no one is sure what Russia will do. It doesn't benefit, it probably benefits them more to be a part of the deal than it does not, but they are still exporting a lot of grain through rail and through what you would call black market sources, that one way or the other, it would not make a huge difference to Russia other than, international perception as they continue to escalate the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and then you look at what started this weekend, the International G7 Summit of all of the international leaders. President Biden and Chairman Xi and all of their handlers met this morning or last night, I guess, to speak and kind of cover about here's what the U.S. would like to see China do, here's what China would like to see the U.S. do. And there was no earth-shattering news, no great developments that China said, oh, okay, we won't invade Taiwan or anything major. It was basically just political theater and rhetoric that accomplished very little. The big news from China is going to continue to be, as you mentioned earlier, just how they get their COVID problems under control, because they continue to have shutdowns of major cities when there are X number of infections, and it has severely hurt their economy. They've been basically in a tough recession for the better part of a year, which pulls the rest of the world into it, since China is the number one end user of raw materials. So that affects everything from copper all the way to soybeans. And that's really where the China news needs to be paid very close attention to, because if China can see their positive test rate go down, or a better way to deal with it and reopen their economy, then you're going to have some traction for it. But right now, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The terrible outcome of what happens with COVID, and then how their economy can be turned around. So several different nuances that they have to work through, and they're really struggling to do it right now.
Yeah, definitely a lot of challenges. They've made that strong policy to zero tolerance, and it looks like they're kind of paying for it here the last 12 months, and certainly no clear end sight in mind at this point. So a lot of things still in limbo there. Along with other things in limbo, Jody, the USDA, they came out with the final reports here, and it was pretty much a non-event, as you referenced.
Yeah, they didn't change yields dramatically one way or the other, raised both of them just slightly. but not of a material nature to move the markets. What they did do is begin to chip away at the borders of what we know is just a terrible start for U.S. corn and wheat exports to begin their fiscal year that started in September, but a decent start when it reflects on soybeans. And of course, China is the major buyer of those. So the big USDA report will be their final report in January that gives all of the totals for the 22 crop and the demand outlook for 23, how the ending stocks will end up both in the U.S. and abroad. And with corn harvest at 93% complete and beans at 96%, they will have more than enough time over the next 2 months to assemble all these numbers, have their test plots, and get all the farmer data back from both NAS and the other resources that they use on insurance claims and things like that.
And of course, making the big headlines last week, Jody, the election across the United States. Are we going to have a change in power? Yes, no. We're still trying to figure that out here, as votes are still being counted in some places. But how's the market reacting, Jody, to the elections at this point?
It's been muted from an election standpoint, even though it's going to come back down to the Georgia runoff to decide if the Democrats get a 2-seat or a 2-vote majority between the vice president and 51 seats, because they lost Pennsylvania, or I say the Republicans lost Pennsylvania, so that gave the Democrats the edge. The Democrats won Nevada in a very close race. They held on to that seat. So now it comes down to the runoff between Warnock and Walker in Georgia at 50-50, which would leave the Senate right where it was over the last 2 years. But the House is going to end up in Republican control, but not nearly by the margin that they expected at the beginning. So what this allows the Biden administration is that they will still be able to influence policy, be able to get policy through, because the Senate will act as a check on the House, vice versa. But this still leans positive towards the biofuel industry, which would support ethanol, which will support soy oil for biodiesel. So all in all, I think this is the ag neutral election, and we will just see how policy starts moving forward towards the next election cycle in 2 years.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of things in flux there, and still, getting ferreted out here over the next 30 days until that Georgia election takes place, and kind of instrumental, really, if you think about it, because as you mentioned, yes, the Democrats may be in charge with the votes, bringing in the vice president, but boy, it's a lot easier to not have to bring the VP in for that final tiebreaker if not needed, if you're on that side of the aisle, for sure.
Exactly.
Jody, as we're kind of wrapping harvest up across most of the nation, growers are starting to prepare a little bit. What's the economics, outlook from your perspective? I'm kind of catching you off guard a little bit, but what's the economics look like? Growers as they're forward thinking and forward looking to 23.
Well, right now you're seeing kind of good news, bad news situation. As the interest rates continue to rise, you are going to be paying probably at least twice on a normal operating loan interest rate than what you were last year. And let's just, for easy sake, say that you have $1 million operating loan and your interest rate's 3.5% above where it was last year. That comes out to an extra $3,000 a month that you're paying in interest that you were not in 22. And so that comes off of working capital, comes off of improvements to your farm or to your operation, increased payroll for adding people. So the interest rate is certainly going to be the biggest bottom line issue that we see for 23. But on the other side of this, we have seen fertilizer prices soften. I wouldn't say considerably, but they have softened noticeably. So you're going to have to go into prepay season with a keen eye and a sharp pencil to be able to take advantage of your inputs that have drifted off since over the past couple months as world demand has flattened and more product has become available because of better shipping around the globe. Russia's certainly exporting more, and we'll see what their decision is on the export corridor, because if they stay in the export corridor, more Russian fertilizer will be available for 23, which will help cap those prices. So it's kind of a good news, bad news situation. But with the Fed, what we did see last week was the first set of monthly consumer price index or inflation numbers fall below estimates, which sent the stock market up 1,100 points. And if you continue to see inflation beginning to roll over and head back towards a more normal rate, then hopefully the interest rates have peaked and we can begin to see a better outlook for lower interest rates as we move forward. Although for inflation to go down, there are going to have to be some negative recession issues with the broader economy that more often than not don't spill over into the ag economy, because we are thankfully inside of a little bit of a bubble when you talk about some of the bigger macro issues with the economy.
Definitely a lot of moving parts here as we wrap up 22 harvest across most of the nation, as you referenced, about 93% plus probably completed by now in the bins. But, getting ready for, 23 is around the corner. So, Jody, want to thank you for your time today, joining us here on FieldLink, and you're sharing your insight.
Thank you, Bill. It's always good to be on.
This episode of FieldLink is brought to you by Resurge. Resurge is an exclusive low-dust humic granular made from the highest quality humic ore source available. Resurge. Energize your soil and elevate your crops. Joining me now here on FieldLink is Ben Wiggins. Ben works in the research and development area at the Helena Products Group in Memphis. Ben, welcome to FieldLink.
Hi, thanks.
Ben, tell us a little bit about you. How did you end up working here at Helena in the research and development area?
Sure thing. So my name's Ben Wiggins. I've been with Helena now a little over 8 years. I'm a tech development manager for our crop production team. So that means for all of our bioscience and fertility projects, I take a firsthand look at these to evaluate them in the field and with our contract researchers all across the country to determine if a product has a fit within the HPG portfolio. As I said, been here about 8 years, predominantly worked on the crop production side of things. Prior to this was with BASF doing numbered compound research, and prior to that, what my education has all been in is in plant genetics.
Okay.
Was with Pioneer for a while up in Iowa before that.
Okay, and grew up where?
Here in West Tennessee, about 90 miles north of Memphis, but went to school in Middle Tennessee and then graduate school at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and moved from Knoxville to Iowa to Missouri back to West Tennessee, and been living down this way for a little while now.
You've made the rounds then, for sure.
It's been a little bit.
Awesome. And it's good to be a vol right now, right?
It is. We've got a few things need to fall our way, but we're hopefully in year 2 of the Josh Heupel system, we can get into the college football playoffs.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, it's good to see that brand back in the saddle here. Ben, tell us a little bit. One of our featured brands this month is Resurge. Resurge is a product that we brought forward a couple of years ago, and growers are seeing huge benefits with this product across the nation, as well as golf courses and sports turf managers are seeing huge benefits with Resurge Pro. Ben, you were pretty instrumental in the research side of bringing that product forward. Tell us a little bit about the journey, how Resurge really came to be.
Sure thing. So we started looking at Resurge, or the product, the code number that became Resurge, a number of years ago. Originally, we were looking to expand our dry humic market into a air seeder market. The product we were using and still have in the marketplace today, we're not able to put through that type of machinery. It causes issues when it goes through the distributor plates and causes buildup, and it causes a lot of issues in that piece of equipment. So we went back and we're trying to reformulate some things to develop basically a harder granule. And in the process of doing that, we came up with the product that became Resurge. And we've done an extensive amount of testing, everything from fall applied P&K trials to everything from air seeders with wheat, soybeans, and have really been impressed with how that product's performed. And it removed, a key deterrent for a lot of our locations. They didn't like handling the other humics. Even the one we had and the other products in the market space all have an issue with dust. They create a lot of dust. They cause a lot of negative connotations around it. Resurge is a very, very low dust product that can survive and go through all the pinch points and the fertilizer blending application scenarios, and just really has shown a great benefit to our growers as far as both in a yield response and also in handling characteristics.
Yeah, so when I think about Resurge, I think there's really two factors. There's the agronomic performance of the product, yep. and I know your team worked intensively in that area. And then the other side is the application ease, if you will. That's the other key area to that product.
Yeah. So we're using the same ore source for this as we have with our others, and we knew there was a long-standing benefit to using that ore and the quality that it brings to the table. So we knew by using that one, we would maintain those agronomic performances. And by getting to a more uniform prill size, what that does is it brings another level of uniformity to your applications. Mm-hmm. Whether that come through a broadcast fertilizer truck in Iowa spreading out whole fertility blend, or all the way down to a lawn and garden guy who's putting it on a flower bed or in his front yard. Because the more uniform you can make that, the better throw pattern, the more just all around better uniformity comes out of that, just simply due to that prill size.
Right. Consistency is the key.
Yep.
Ben, let's go back to the agronomic benefits of, you referenced the ore source. Yep. What makes the ore source with Resurge, and I hear this a lot in the market, people just talking humics as they're all in one pool, and that's really not true.
Right.
Tell us a little bit from your perspective as a researcher, the difference from the ore source that Helena has access to versus some of the others in the marketplace.
Sure thing. One of the biggest issues with a lot of other humics and their ore sources, you start looking at usage rates. And the reason why a lot of these other usage rates are in the 2, 3, 500, even up to 1,000 pounds of their product per acre. The reason for that is in the manufacturing process. Their ore isn't as high quality. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening in their manufacturing, they add heat to this. And by adding heat to a product that quality is already lower, the longer chains that are there, when we add heat to it, we start breaking those chains apart.
Okay.
When we break those chains apart, you reduce the number of active sites for nutrient holding and a lot of other different things that these humic acids can do. And when we start breaking those, performance of the product will go down. So in turn, what the competition does is they have to increase their rates to make it perform hopefully as good as. But in reality, what ends up happening, growers not going to put on 1,000 pounds of something an acre that doesn't have a long-standing gypsum type product. When we talk about these humics, you see, and everybody advertises, even we look at a 10, 20, maybe a 40-pound rate, depending on what you're trying to accomplish for your soil type. When you look at our competitors, they try to come in and say, oh yeah, we're at 10 pounds an acre, just like them. And then you start looking through the label, and it's like, oh, the rate range for it actually starts at 100 pounds and goes up to that 1,000 pounds per acre range. So just the quality of the ore source, how it's mined, the handling characteristics of it once it comes out, and then the manufacturing and making those individual pills is really where the road starts dividing out between a quality product and an inferior product.
So Ben, as a researcher, tell us a little bit about some of the trials that you got to participate in prior to launching Resurge, and how did that product perform in the research settings?
Sure. So we wanted to take a look at that in a number of different ways, one of which was to evaluate it against what we were already doing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of our main focus is like we know we carry a premium line of products. We know how they perform against our competition. If we're going to carry something on as an HPG product, it's got to perform as well, if not better, than our traditional line. And when we brought Resurge along, it was kind of let's just see. We know the ore source is right. It's gone through a slight change in a manufacturing process. We just want to make sure. Mm-hmm. We had done a lot of in-house handling of the product, and you had handled worlds different than a lot of these other humic type products. In doing so, we felt really confident in it, but that's what the research is about. The research is going to tell us how it's performing in the field. We can do a lot of lab studies to evaluate it, how well it's breaking down, that sort of thing. But we started out looking at fall applied stuff, and the next step of that, we went out with our fall P&K blends. The next step was actually simulating an air seeder with some fall applied winter wheat, because we know in those situations it gets to be a little hectic, because we talk about an air seeder, and Bill, we're sitting at a table here that's about 8 foot long.
Sure.
Yeah, air seeders are not 8 foot long. They're 60, 80 feet long.
Right.
Those air seeders don't exist in a small plot research so that we can run statistics on that, which is very key to evaluating a product.
Right.
And so we had to find a way to simulate that. Well, a lot of guys here in the Mid-South and across a wide geography here, they've still got old dry insecticide boxes.
Yep.
So they're easy to mount on and use those in place when we're running and trying to simulate that air seeder application. That's how we did a lot of our air seeder trials, is simulating that kind of application method. Not exactly the same way. We can do the hardness tests and that kind of stuff outside of a field application. But simulating that on a small plot research basis, started out, the first applications were those fall P&Ks, that winter wheat trial, and then we really expanded that next spring into our spring application trials, our big air seeder stuff with soybeans, and then following that up as like a dry banded 2x2, as well as like a broadcasted dry fertilizer spreader trials across corn, cotton, and a number of other different products as well, even spreading off into turf.
Okay.
And really got a good feeling on that after the first year. Was really impressed with the way not only that it performed agronomically, the responses we were seeing back out with enhanced nutrient uptake into each of these crops, and then also at the end of the year where we're seeing that show up in a yield number. We were also seeing better root development across all this kind of all these different crops, and really expanding that. We took it into the next year, and we said, okay, we've done a lot of this. We got a really good broad set. Let's expand it even more. We doubled up our number of locations that next year, and really felt really comfortable with it. The next stage of our R&D process really is where our tech service managers get involved.
Okay.
We take it out of the house here of HPG, expand it into those tech service managers, and start letting them get their hands on it, play around with it, try to fit it more locally to their specific markets. If they've got an application that's specific to them. I know we had one TSM, he moved it into He's got a small geography that's really big with sweet potatoes.
Okay.
And they put a full fertilizer blend basically in the bed, turn that bed over so that fertilizer is all incorporated, and then come back and put their transplants in the top of that. Well, that's a perfect opportunity for Resurge because we're right there. All that fertilizer, all that dry fertilizer is right there. And otherwise, if we can ban something, we're in that root zone. We're a little bit more targeted in how that's going to perform and get better access to those nutrients for that next crop. Broadcasting does give you a benefit of, we can cover a lot of acres really fast and get some really good coverage. And that's the predominant way that Resurge is used. This isn't a broadcast application from a fertilizer truck, but we've enhanced that fertilizer efficiency because we're able to get that Resurge on in a more uniform pattern through that spray pattern or throw pattern.
And more conveniently in aesthetics, you referenced on the front end, you don't have the dust factor, and hey, in agriculture today, if it doesn't look good, we're dealing with a society that there must be something bad happening, and Resurge is just one of those products that really minimizes that risk.
Sure does. When you take Resurge, and one of the big markets that we moved into early on with Resurge was in our rice market.
Okay.
Especially here in the Mid-South, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Boot Hill, Missouri. That was one of the first target markets for us. What ended up happening there that we noticed, we would blend that up in a blender at a location, and these fertilizer managers would make comments on how it blended and all this kind of stuff, and everybody would write back on that urea and Resurge blend looks like salt and pepper. And it was the first time that these guys had really seen that because with a lot of these other humics, they're dusty. The urea gets kind of gray. There's a lot of waste material that gets built up in the bottom between the pinch points. And with this one, it flowed out real clean, looks really nice, and then has that beautiful salt and pepper look to it.
Wow. Well, salt and pepper, bringing the '80s song back, right? Or band, whatever.
Well, I wouldn't know much about that, Bill. I'm only 35.
Google it, right? But I think you bring up a great point. A visual aspect of things, lower dust is really important for a lot of producers, and especially golf superintendents. You think about the sports turf market, keeping that dust down, keeping parents happy, especially in urban markets. I think it's a huge win. Ben, broadly speaking, how many trials roughly when you were doing the R&D side of things with Resurge a few years back?
Sure thing. Over the first 2 years, we were looking at close to 200.
Okay.
And it's only really, exploded since then because not only do we continue to try to expand that trial database set for Resurge, but our TSMs get ideas from the field of like, hey, can we do it with this specific blend, or can we try this different application method, that kind of thing. And it's one of those products that's going to be a core product for a lot of folks, a real focused product. And everybody's got a lot of good ideas about the next way to bring that around to somebody who's not using it right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I think it's always, Dr. Hert talked about it earlier, about, you mentioned a couple hundred trials before launching this brand. Those are third-party trials.
Correct.
Those are third-party independent researchers that are coming to you saying, here's the data.
Yep. So a lot of people refer to them as CROs, contract research organizations. And what that is, that's no different than any kind of local plumber that he's out there, he does plumbing work. If you got a leak in your house, he'll come in and fix it. For these CROs, they are independent groups all across the country. We send trial work out. It's a code number to them. They don't really have a clue what it is. There's some guidelines around it. So if we're working with a pesticide, we may list and say it's this kind of active ingredient.
Sure.
Or If for this case, we'll tell them it's a humic acid type trial, and they go, okay. And it's just a safety thing for them.
Right.
But these CROs, they work with everyone. They work with Helena, they work with all the big basic suppliers and evaluating all their products for them because they have a expertise in a geography where not everybody's located.
Yeah, it's just the economic thing,
Right.
but you referenced the key one. They're the local expert agronomically
Correct.
for that geography. And when we can get a couple hundred trials like you referenced with Resurge out there, we've got 200 plus experiences now where we can tell a story and build a narrative before we bring that product to the
Correct.
marketplace.
Correct.
Yeah.
That way they've got experience with it, and so if somebody questions it, say, "Hey, have you ever heard of this?" Well, they may not know it as the branded name, but they definitely know what it is by the way it looks and handles and performs.
I think you bring up a great point for our listeners. We don't go to research and say, hey, here's a new product called Resurge, check it out.
Correct.
We say, here's a coded number.
Yep.
And they don't know if it's ours or a competitor's
Anybody
or
else's
anybody's in the
Yep.
world. And they're giving you a true, hey, these are the facts.
Yep.
And I think our customers really, it's a sense of reassurance
Yep.
that we're bringing together, bringing forward products that are truly tested and independently evaluated.
Correct. Yep. And then that way we get true reality of how these are performing in that marketplace, and so that we can make the best judgment and say, yep, that has a fit within our portfolio. We should make room for it. Or, hey, we see it all the time in fertility type products. Somebody comes in with a new zinc product and they have a good story about it, but they don't have any substance behind it.
Right.
And that's where us and the R&D department come in. We take their validate or prove false their claims, and with Resurge, it was one of those that literally hit it out of the park.
That's awesome. Ben Wiggins, Research and Development here at the Helena Products Group. I want to thank you for joining us here today on FieldLink.
All right, appreciate it, Bill. Thanks for the great conversation.
You bet. Thanks for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to check with your Helena representative to learn more about this month's featured product, Resurge, where you can energize your soil and elevate your crops.